Hey, what's up everyone? It's GC Kinsey, here to talk about Timothy LeDuc and what their visibility as an openly non-binary athlete means in the extremely binary sport of figure skating. In June of 2021, American pair skater Timothy LeDuc gave skating fans something big to celebrate during Pride Month by coming out as non-binary. I previously had an inkling about this because at one point when Timothy used to have social media, their bio listed multiple sets of pronouns, but they officially confirmed it in an interview on the US Figure Skating Instagram account, which I have linked below in the description if you want to check that out. And now, in March of 2022, I want to talk about why Timothy's coming out was and still is so important. Just a little context about the state of things in the trans community at this time. There are currently more than 250 pieces of anti-trans legislation that have been proposed in various states across the US, and unfortunately, a few states have already signed anti-trans hate into law. Almost 60 of these anti-trans bills focus on trying to ban trans athletes from participating in school sports. And we have Trans Day of Visibility coming up at the end of this month on March 31st, at an incredibly dangerous time in America's history for people to be visibly trans. Trans Day of Visibility is supposed to be all about celebrating the trans community, which, in light of the current state of things, might feel kinda difficult. But I don't want to lose sight of the positive purpose of this day, because as trans folks, we can certainly use something uplifting right about now. So that's why I'm making this video about Timothy LeDuc, to celebrate everything that they have achieved as an openly non-binary figure skater. Which is a lot. Timothy and their skating partner Ashley Kane Gribble have had an amazing career together, and this most recent season has been especially outstanding. Last fall, Ashley and Timothy won bronze medals at 3 different international competitions. Then in January, they took the US senior title, making Timothy the first openly non-binary US national champion in figure skating, not just in pairs, but in any division. In February, Timothy became the first openly non-binary Winter Olympian ever, and with a top 10 finish to boot. Timothy and Ashley finished in 8th place overall. And just this past weekend, Timothy made history yet again, this time as the first openly non-binary competitor at the ISU Figure Skating World Championships. Timothy and Ashley unfortunately had to withdraw after Ashley sustained a head injury during the free skate. She's recovering from that now, and we hope that she's going to be okay. But before that happened, Timothy and Ashley were well on their way to winning a medal with a very strong 2nd place finish in the short program. This is huge. Timothy isn't just one of those athletes who says, okay, I'm gonna go for the experience and maybe try to get a personal best. No, they are a high-ranking, elite-level athlete. And they're representing the US at that level during a time when so many American lawmakers want to ban people like them from even getting started in sports in the first place. It blows my mind. As a non-binary person myself, and a longtime fan of figure skating, I started watching the sport in 1998. It's hard to put into words just what this kind of representation means to me. Because figure skating is honestly the last sport where you would ever expect a non-binary person to be able to even participate, much less succeed. If you're not super familiar with figure skating, then you may be going, huh? Isn't figure skating like the gayest sport ever? And it does have that reputation from the outside. Figure skating is a combination of athleticism and performance art, and the performing arts, such as theater or music or dance, tend to give queer people an outlet and a platform to express themselves. But skating is still a sport at the end of the day, and sports are notorious for being much less welcoming to queer participants. I think it can also be argued that the performing arts are not necessarily as welcoming of queer folks as they may appear from the outside either, especially at a professional level, but that's a whole different subject for another video. Figure skating is a sport that is steeped in tradition, with tons of rules and expectations around gender that I quite frankly find outdated and pointless. The sport has 4 disciplines: men's singles, women's singles, pairs, and ice dance. And yes, even though pairs and ice dance are mixed gender categories, the rules are still written to specify that each team should have one man and one woman, with the man as the leading partner and the woman as the following partner, so they're still just as binary as the singles categories. In fact, there's not any room in how the sport is structured for non-binary athletes to participate as themselves. And yet, Timothy LeDuc is out here doing it anyway. They are living proof that the rules and the categories in figure skating need an update to reflect the reality of our world. But the International Skating Union only stopped calling the women's division ladies in 2021. Yes, really, 2021. So unfortunately, I'm not holding my breath. What often makes an even bigger impact on skaters' careers is the unwritten rules of the sport, the expectations, and those are very rigid along gender lines as well. For example, in the women's division, there's no rule against wearing pants on the ice anymore, but you rarely see competitors deviate from the expectation of wearing a skirt, and that's probably because there's nothing to stop a judge from deciding that you're not ladylike enough and reflecting that in your scores. At the 2022 Winter Olympics, only one skater out of 30 in the women's short program wore pants. One. In the men's division, however, there's sort of an irony that most casual viewers would think the skaters are queer based solely on their costumes. There are a lot of aspects to the costumes like ruffles or rhinestones or sparkles that men wear on the ice that would never be associated with straightness or masculinity off the ice. In fact, Nathan Chen drew criticism for erroneously calling figure skating a homosexual-dominated sport in a 2021 interview, and quickly apologized after several figure skaters and others in the sport educated him about the truth. Which is that figure skating is anything but homosexual-dominated or queer-dominated in any way. Most queer figure skaters have competed in the closet, especially at the international level, until very recently. Believe it or not, we didn't see any out queer figure skaters at the Olympics until the 2018 Games in Pyeongchang. Yes, really, 2018. That was when Adam Rippon from the United States competed as openly gay in men's singles, and Eric Radford from Canada competed as openly gay in pairs. But what about Johnny Weir, you may ask? Nope, he actually didn't come out until 2011 after his 2 trips to the Olympics in 2006 and 2010. So why did it take so long? Well, that largely comes down to the fact that figure skating is a judged sport, and with judging always comes subjectivity. Part of your score is the component score, otherwise known as the artistic score, and that tends to be very subjective no matter how many times the ISU changes the rules. So there's a risk that the judges could ding you on your component scores if you don't meet their expectations of how they think you should perform. If a man's skating is too feminine, if a woman's skating is too masculine, if a skater is even suspected of being queer, much less actually out, then their scores could be at risk. In fact, that actually happened to Johnny Weir before he came out. He was underscored multiple times during his competitive career just because he was assumed to be gay. And although that assumption turned out to be correct, it should have never affected his scores. But because this can and clearly does happen, most skaters have found it safer to wait to come out until after they have retired. And while the risk of biased judging is bad enough in single skating, it can be even worse in pairs and ice dance, because part of what they're judging you on in your performance is the connection between partners. So if you come out, and then you're supposed to be competing as part of this man-woman duo according to the rules, and you're being judged on that performance, it's all too easy for a judge to say, hey, I know you're gay and I'm not buying it. This can make it more difficult for queer pair skaters or ice dancers to find partners because that bias in the judging would affect the partner as well. That's actually something that Timothy LeDuc has spoken about experiencing, because they were out as gay before they were out as non-binary, and they struggled to find a partner who would accept them until they met their current partner, Ashley Kane Gribble. Ashley has been not only a perfect match for Timothy on the ice, but also an incredible ally to them in general. And although she may be a straight cis woman, she defies plenty of gender expectations on the ice herself, most notably with her costumes, many of which include that rare choice of pants. She's also made it a point to convey fierceness and strength on the ice, rather than taking on that more traditional, delicate flower role in pairs. In an episode of My New Favorite Olympian, which I have also linked in the description in case you want to watch it, Ashley and Timothy talked about how they like to convey different kinds of stories than the usual straight couple in love kind of program. And what's been really cool to see is that Timothy's gender and Ashley's style and the kinds of programs they like to do have not had a negative impact on their scores in any way. In fact, this pair has had more success than ever after Timothy came out as non-binary, and based on past judging history in the sport, that could have gone very differently. There unfortunately was a lot of transphobic backlash online after Timothy came out, and especially after they made history at the Olympics. Seriously, if you see any articles about Timothy, don't read the comments unless you hate your life and want to be sad. But within the sport itself, there hasn't been a negative impact on Timothy and Ashley's career, and it makes me really happy to see the two of them doing so well and being so successful in spite of all the risks that they've faced. It also makes me happy that figure skating seems to be finally moving more and more in the right direction when it comes to queer people having a place in the sport. Between the 2018 and the 2022 Winter Olympics, we saw an increase in the number of openly queer figure skaters competing at the Games from 2 to 9. In Beijing, there were 8 openly gay men and, of course, 1 openly non-binary athlete competing in figure skating. And one of those gay men, Guillaume Cizeron from France, even took home the gold medal in ice dance. I do wish it hadn't taken the sport so long to get to this point. And make no mistake, things still have a long way to go. Every openly queer figure skater, especially someone like Timothy LeDuc as an openly non-binary figure skater, has had to take a risk and blaze a trail. They've all had to succeed in spite of the nature of their sport instead of because of it. And that needs to change. There's also a reason that I've kept specifying openly queer skaters throughout this video, because there are so many skaters who could not be out when they competed, but that didn't make them any less queer. We will never know how many skaters have competed in a box they didn't belong in, whether that was a gender box or an orientation box or maybe both, because they couldn't compete authentically. And just because there are more openly queer skaters competing now than ever before, doesn't mean there aren't still some who are competing in the closet. Timothy LeDuc may have been the only openly non-binary athlete competing at the 2022 Winter Olympics, but I highly doubt they were the only non-binary athlete there. And they probably haven't been the only non-binary athlete at a lot of their other skating competitions either. We still live in a world where being out as non-binary, especially in what might be the world's most binary sport, is a huge risk. So I just want to wrap this up by thanking Timothy for taking that risk, for being a visible beacon of hope for everyone in the trans and non-binary community who's wondered if it's possible to make it in figure skating, especially at the elite level. For giving queer, non-binary figure skating fans like myself a reason to keep loving this sport in spite of all of its issues. For just being themselves, visibly, and authentically and unapologetically out there on the ice. Timothy, thank you so much. And thank you for watching this video. If you have any thoughts or questions that you'd like to share, I would love to hear from you. Are you a figure skater or a fan of the sport? And if so, what do you think about all of its rules and traditions? How do you want to see figure skating, or sports in general, evolve to be more inclusive and affirming of all athletes? What are some things that give you hope in the face of all of these threats to the ability of trans athletes to compete? Drop a comment below and let's get a discussion going. If you want to reach out to me on other social media, I am GC Kinsey across all platforms, and while you're here, feel free to check out one of my other videos. I have more vlogs like this one about my experiences as a queer person, along with cosplay music videos, makeup tutorials, pre-testosterone voice recordings, and more right here on this channel. So make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. And again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for all of your support. I hope you learned a lot. I hope you have a fantastic Trans Day of Visibility, and I will see you on the next one.